other point, I think, for education with you is like the intellectual climate at universities. You've said you weren't a fan of the intellectual climate at university. Maybe free speech is the problem. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, what I found at uni...
Let's start with free speech, yeah.
What I found at university was that if you had a certain political affiliation, you couldn't disclose it. If you would, I think it would be hell to pay. You'd rather sit down, head down, do your degree. There's no point of creating a reform society in certain unis because it's just gonna get hounded. And we want to make sure that our supporters and our people are safe. But that's the thing. People won't want to express because they instantly get slammed down and shouted down. And that's not fair. That's not freedom of speech. Now, would we
do you see a parallel with, for example, because you're pro-free speech with universities in general, right, for example, but you complained about, for example, the frequency of Palestine protests at university. Isn't there an equivalence that, because, Palestine protesters have a lot of run-ins with the police and so on, and, that should be allowed to happen as well, shouldn't it? And yet you didn't seem keen on it when you're at university. Protesting for Palestine or expressing a view in support of reform. These are two sides of the same coin, right? And yet you're not keen for one when it comes to free speech, and you are keen for the other.
No.
There's a bit of an imbalance, right?
Protesting, perfectly fine. Locking the door of a lecture and in effect holding the lecture hall hostage and stopping the learning of multiple students, I think that's crossing the line. And then causing criminal damage on the university campus by graffitiing all across the walls, think that's crossing the line. Do you think a reform society would do that? Or they just try and promote their political beliefs? Well, I doubt they would. And that's the difference.
Well, hold on. If you don't mind, I mean, like, this is not to say that this is the policy of reform at all, but, pro-Palestine protesters don't necessarily represent a cause as a whole. And on the other side, for example, so they may have done, for example, criminal damage. Criminal damage has been done in protests which contain loads of reform supporters as well. And so,
that's the thing.
Two sides of the same coin, right?
No, because there's bad eggs in every group. That's life. But when you go and do that and hinder people's educations, and then you come into our lecture and then you say, we're going to do another protest, disturb the whole lecture hall, fine, I get it, didn't care about that. And then when the actual lecturer stands up and goes, everyone write to the chancellor of the university and tell the chancellor to write to the police to get the people released that did the criminal damage, I think that's a bit too far. That's not common sense. That's not fair. And that's not fair on everybody in those lecture halls. Do you know how it started? Do you know how it started?
But isn't that lecturer expressing free speech there?
No. Look.
By asking you to do that.
This is the point. Universities are meant to... If I stood up and then said, no, I don't think that's right, what do you think would happen? Do you think...
Maybe you'd get a bit of chat. It's not the worst thing in the world, is it?
No, but this is the point, is that you are not allowed to express certain beliefs at universities because you have got a certain political affiliation. And that needs to change. And it's not just in universities. That's a different kettle of fish because you are meant to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought. And whatever you believe, don't care. You don't care if I support reform. I don't care if you've got a Labour Society. But this is my point. Imagine if when they do freshers events and you've got all the little societies, just imagine if there was a reform one. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've seen like pro-abortion ones. Probably even.
I haven't seen that one.
Exist. No. In Oxford, maybe one of the you might say the wokest with many pro-abortion stands.
Well, that's exactly.
But you do have this kind of thing, like there's a conservative society at where we went to uni, for example, which is ginormous, and there's loads of reform supporters in there. They don't get hounded. There might be people who don't like them, right?
Maybe now reform will come as a...
Yeah, I think they'll defect to make their own one. That would be funny to see.
I wouldn't be surprised that would be kind of accepted.
I think some of... And this is the thing, is that the attitudes and people's political affiliations have changed quite recently and quite dramatically. So there is going to be that new change that's been seen in universities where reform will start popping up, that it will be new. And then when you've got old political parties, they'll be like, oh, there's a new kid on the block. Let's not Do you know what I mean? And that's just life. But it's not just about unis. We can't just get solely stuck onto universities, because it's other education establishments, sixth forms and secondary schools, and even primary schools, which I've seen. I've read their curriculums, very questionable.
Where do you think the woke agenda comes from? Is it from the teachers? Is it from the Prime Minister? Is it from the students themselves?
I think why people, and this is the question I've asked, why are they so accepting of certain change? Why aren't people questioning a lot of stuff, especially in education, where young people are meant to be asking these questions, are meant to be talking about things.
University is about.
That's exactly what it should be about. But what we've seen is there's been a lot of suppression when it comes to certain topics, especially I've seen it in schools. There's one
in universities, a lot of suppression.
I think it's all across the education establishment.
Can you give us an example of when this got suppressed, like free speech is suppressed?
So if we've seen it in universities all across the country, we've seen stories where people have been kicked out of lecture halls. They've been told they've been made complaints.
For doing what?
Well, as simple as expressing a certain political affiliation.
What sort of affiliation? Supporting reform, kicked out of uni for supporting reform.
Not just supporting reform, but maybe you were pro-Christian, or you had
Christians have been kicked out for being Christian.
No, but mate, this is my point: is that there has been many complaints across this country, especially in our education establishments, and it's becoming too political. And this is my point. You need to step out of that, out of suppressing people from whatever walk of life, whatever political affiliation. This is my point. It's not about whether they're kicking out for reform or Palestine. It doesn't matter which side of the scale you're on. And this is what people are getting too hung up on, is, you're getting kicked out for reform, or you get kicked out because of Labour. It's not about that. It's about you getting kicked out, full stop. And that's what needs to stop. You need to be able to have that freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and not be thinking, I might not be able to say that. If you say it, especially in schools, if you say things and it might not, the people might not agree around it, then your peers will say, no, that was inappropriate. You don't then need disciplinary action. I think it's too far.
Where's the line for that? Because there is a certain line where something becomes hate speech, right? And it's an interesting question. Yeah. Where does that sit for you? Yeah. When should we tell someone off in school for what they say? What's an example of the
I think what we need to, and this is the thing, I think what we need to realise is that, especially young people, they are evolving comedically as a person. They are going to say things, and when it does reach a certain threshold, yes, fair enough, you will go down that.
But where is that threshold?
Well, when you start being, and what I've seen, especially in schools in my neck of the woods, it's very different to where it is in other parts of the country. If you're just making a joke, just
a joke about, let's say a casual joke about black people, would that be all right?
No, I don't think that would be appropriate. I think on my personal opinion, I think what people need to realise is that children are exploring themselves comedically and think they're gonna cross the line. It's inevitable.
So if someone makes a race joke, should they get disciplinary action?
I think
probably, right?
Well, when it comes to things like that, you have to realise is that you have to take it on a common sense level, as in they are young people, but you do need to have that conversation with them. That basic conversation,
some sort of discipline. That's what conversation is, right? It's discipline.
Yeah, like for instance, if you pushed your mate in the corridor, and you just, I'm a bit stronger than you, you're a bit stronger than me, and you push him a bit too much, and he falls and knocks the bin over. Your teacher will tell you off, and then you'll realise, best not do that again. It's things like that, but you shouldn't then get the whole book thrown at you, which I've seen in schools myself, where it has been a bit over the top with other things as well. And I think we just need to we just have to go back to the basics. And it's not, again, about certain jokes. It's just when it comes down to, you need to realise that these are children at the end of the day. And a lot of this stuff, and I'll bring it back onto parenting as well soon enough. But what we need to realise is that when it comes to education, especially teachers as well, that they are the kind of unsung heroes in a sense of making these children explore through books and literature and all of the aspects of education, which is amazing. I had some really great teachers that expanded the whole class's mind. And when you did have that debate, they were quite they were quite allowing of the political views, and that was great. And especially in sixth form, when you were learning A-level politics, it's great for people to express that. So that's why what we have to do is, install British values back into schools. I think you have to take some sort of common sense approach to a lot of things.
The difficulty with common sense,
instance,
right, is it's not something you can really define when it comes to these things, right? Saying, let's take a common sense issue. Let's look at specific issues in order to explore, like, what you mean by common sense, for example, right?
Yeah, well,
like primary school curriculums, you said,
when
the stuff is shocking. What's on the curriculum that's shocking?
Yeah, when a 6-year-old in PHSE is in the curriculum, it says for year 6 to 7 that they need to ask, say little Timmy's asked what he doesn't like about being a boy and what he'd prefer about being a girl. Do you think that's appropriate? And
is that mandated in UK curriculums?
That's in the PHSE curriculum that this school has taken on. Now,
just one school?
And this is the thing. This is what we're doing. As I said, we're getting our feet under the table. And this is the point about what we're doing on Warwickshire County Council. And this is why I said about schools, is we're going through all these PHSE, especially primary school curriculums, and just looking through them on a common sense basis. Do you think that's right? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Maybe when they're a little, older, I'm not really bothered, but not at that age. And this is the point that we're making, is that that's not appropriate at that age. And I think no one can disagree with that. And that's then things, and you go, well, I will explore PHSE curriculum. Oh, I found this one. That's a bit shocking. A resident come up to me and they showed me the curriculum. I went, God, that's a bit, come on. Mm-hmm. So surely not. And then they sent it to me and I looked at it and read through it and I was shocked. So then what we're going to do, what we've got the education portfolio holder to do, is go through them and just have a look. Maybe it's only that one school, but if it is, we ain't got powers over the education system in Warwickshire. County councils rarely do nowadays because it's been academised. Another thing Tony Blair did, but
actually that was the Conservative government.
No, Tony Blair did start the academisation of schools. Tony Blair did begin those things.
We can fact check that after, don't worry.
Yeah, but it's the same with the universities and the polytechnics. Another thing, it was this major change. Michael Gove did start edging the way through with academisation, but it was mentioned and the ball got rolling. Same with privatisation of the NHS through Tony Blair. But this is the thing, is that bring it back onto education, is that what we're finding is, what I'm getting the portfolio holders to look at is those things, to question it. And if we do find something, then I think it's a conversation that should be had between the portfolio holder and the head teacher or the CEO of the trust. I think it's something that is things that your councillors should be looking at. So I'm looking forward to have a looking through these curriculums and see if there is anything. If there's not, great. Well done to them.